All right, so go ahead and tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Brenton Potter. I wear a lot of hats. If we're talking professionally, I'm a tattoo artist of 15 years and a Bucyrus City Councilman. I would say outside of that, but first and foremost, I'm a father, a husband, and I think a lot of people tend to forget about that. But that's the biggest part of my life.
Where are you from originally?
So I like to say that I'm the poster child of Crawford County because I was born in Gallion. I was raised in Bucyrus, or I was raised in Crestline. Graduated high school from Bucyrus, and that's where I started my life and my career. So,
What made you get into tattooing?
I feel like that's kind of a long-winded story, but I'll give you the shorter end of it. A lot of us tattooers kind of have the same generalized story about how we got into the business, spending time in tattoo shops, getting tattooed, bugging the crap out of the guy or girl that's tattooing you. But for me, I think it started at a lot younger of an age. My dad, he was big into hot rods and going to car shows, so he would drag me out to those all the time, and I would follow around the pinstripers and watch what they were doing. And I was really interested in that aspect of art. And later on in my life, I integrated that into what I offer as well. I pinstripe and I sign paint. But I think that's where it started for me, getting interested in different forms of art, watching these guys do their thing, and I wanted to be a part of that in whatever way I could.
So it sounds like your dad was a pretty big influence on.
Yeah, he was, man. He had a little bit of artistry in himself. I mean, he would build cars from scratch. You know, he was big into old cars. I couldn't even tell you how many cars he had throughout my life. But yeah, he played a big part in that, and he was a little adamant on me getting into tattooing when I first started. You know, he's old school. He was born in 1948. He had me in his 40s. You know, so it was interesting when I came to him and said, "Hey, Dad, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to pursue with my life." And at first, I don't think he thought that was the greatest idea for his son. But later on, once he realized that I could make an honest living and start a family and maintain my life financially, and I was happy with what I was doing, I think he really was proud of me. He passed in 2020, so it's been tough, but it's nice to know that my legacy for my children going forward derived from him. So
Sorry to hear that.
yeah.
So you actually have your own tattoo parlor in Bucyrus, correct?
I do. I actually kind of fell into that as well. I was 19. Started tattooing when I was 18. I tattooed my whole senior year of high school. And then when I was 19, I was kind of presented with the opportunity to purchase the shop that I was at. So we bought it. I bought it. My coworker Tori, who's still there with me now, she stayed with me through all that, and we've ended up building it into something that we can all be proud of. But at the time, I didn't know what I was doing running a business. I had no business doing that. But if I hadn't fell into it, I don't know if my life would have played out the way that it has.
Go ahead and tell us what the name of the place is. And
it's the Tattoo Factory. It's downtown Bucyrus, right across the street from Wendy's. It's 334 South Sandusky Avenue. We've been in that same location for, it was the other shop for 2 years, and then when we changed the name, it was 2010, so we've been there for 13 years. So
nice.
Yeah.
So how did that affect you with your dad passing away, with him having such a big influence on?
Well, it was tough, man. I mean, losing a parent's not something that you can bounce back quickly from, or you can't really explain it to somebody that hasn't been through it. I'm sure there's some people that'll be watching that's been through it themselves, but me and my dad, we had a great relationship as I grew older, as I was an adult, and we could relate on more things. So around the time that our relationship was really thriving and we could find a lot of common interests, he passed, and we were there for it. That took a big toll on me. To watch somebody pass away and right in front of your eyes is is tough, especially somebody you care about so much, So it's been tough, but I got to pick my head up and keep it moving. I think that's what he would have wanted me to do.
If you don't mind me asking, how did he pass away?
Well, he had cancer. I think he had it longer than he knew he had it, or maybe longer than he let us knew he had it. Yeah. But ultimately, pneumonia is what took him out. He got pneumonia and he was in the hospital for an extended period of time, and ultimately, that he succumbed to that. But you would have never known. Sorry, you would have never known. He was always riding his motorcycle, and he just kept it moving. And I'm glad that he didn't have to suffer at the end of his life like most people do in that position. So there is some good from it.
So you're a city council member. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's definitely been interesting. I get asked this question a lot, and I don't always know how to answer it because I never saw myself in this kind of position. A good friend of mine years ago when I was helping out as much as I could in the community. We do toy drives at the tattoo shop. We've done benefits for people who have maybe passed away in an unfortunate circumstance. But a few years ago, a good friend of mine, he called me the community kid, and that kind of stuck with me. So I thought maybe that getting myself in a position to be elected to the city council and to be able to help out in that kind of manner would make my platform a little bit bigger for me to reach out to more people. And it has. I mean, there's a lot of drama that comes with that. There's a lot of mental, it takes a big mental toll on you, dealing with the scrutiny and being in the public limelight like that. But for the most part, I enjoy it. The next election is coming up, and I've been on the fence about what I wanted to do, and I think I'm going to stick it out and see what the future brings.
People that are part of the city council along with you, what's kind of their perception of you? I mean, you have a bunch of tattoos. You're
Sure.
a younger guy.
Yeah. So at first, I thought it would be a bigger issue than it actually was. Believe it or not, the community and the other council members, the mayor, they've all been pretty accepting of me. They might not always agree with how I vote on things and my position on certain subjects, but for the most part, everybody's been pretty accepting. There's been a few instances that I've gotten some ridicule for the way I look or for what I do, but I think everybody knows my heart's in the right place, and I think that's what ultimately matters. So there's a part of me that hopes that I can, even on such a small scale, maybe alleviate that stigma a little bit about tattooed people or young people getting involved in low-level politics.
Tell us a little bit about how you were raised.
So my upbringing and my family might be one of the more interesting parts of my story. My dad and my mom, they were never married. They were together for a short time. There's a significant age difference there. That never really caused any issues. It's just the way my dad lived his life and the way my mom lived her life were completely different. But I was raised fairly poor. My mom did everything she could as a single mom to provide for me. I was her only child. And I think she did a good job of not projecting that stress that she may had onto her son, because I lived a very good life for what we had. Just to put it in perspective, I would say that she raised me in the 90s making maybe 10 grand or less a year, which is almost unfathomable in today's day and age, but she did a good job, and I never went without. And we're still able to do fun stuff, and I really have some great fond memories of my childhood. I came from a split home, so, it was dad on the weekends, mom throughout the week, and dad would take me on vacations and, like I said earlier, car shows and stuff like that. So I would say that played a big factor in kind of who I've become today, is having that mix of how I lived at one house and how I lived at another house. You know, so I'm appreciative of both of them for what they did for me.
Tell us a little bit about how your life's going now, your family, friends, hobbies.
It's going pretty well, man. I mean, unfortunately, I don't get a whole lot of time for friends. Me and my wife, we've been together for 15 years. We're high school sweethearts. We have 3 beautiful children. I have a 10-year-old. We have a 3.5-year-old that has cerebral palsy, so that's really put an extra struggle into our lives and navigating that, you know. But she's thriving and she's doing well. They said that she was never going to walk, and she's been walking for quite some time now, you know. So I also have a 1.5-year-old son. You know, they're all doing great. They're great kids. They're smart. They're good listeners. As far as my home life goes, it couldn't get much better than that. So, but yeah, hobbies, man, it's hard. You know, as you know, work kind of becomes your hobby, especially when you love it. But I enjoy shooting guns, and you know, I tattoo at Comic-Con, so I'm a bit of a nerd myself. You know, I get into all things pop culture, Star Wars and Marvel and all that, you know, so.
Hence the Lucasfilm shirt.
Yeah. Actually, that's another thing that's pretty cool, is I'm a Lucasfilm endorsed artist. So with the Comic-Cons that we work, I tattoo with a group called Ink Fusion. We're kind of a collective of artists from all around the country and even overseas. We have artists from Italy, the UK, but we tattoo at Star Wars Celebration, and they do that every year to 2 years, just depending on what city it's in, and you have to be licensed by Lucasfilm to do that. So, yeah, it's pretty cool to have that notch in the belt, but especially since I've been a Star Wars fan since I was a kid, you know.
Going back to your daughter, go ahead and explain to people who might not be familiar with it what cerebral palsy is.
Okay, well, she does not have your stereotypical cerebral palsy diagnosis. Sometimes they use that as like a blanket diagnosis. You'll see, you know, your stereotypical cerebral palsy child has like really tight muscles. You know, so a lot of times they're cramped up. She has hypotonic cerebral palsy, so she actually has very loose muscle tone. So it's kept her from doing a lot of stuff normal children can. She's spent some time in a wheelchair. She spent time in something called a gait trainer, which people probably aren't super familiar with, but it's like a walker on wheels, you know, to help her be more independent and mobile. She has some neurological issues too. We've been through countless genetic tests to try to figure out what issues she may be dealing with. We just recently got a call from OSU that they test her genes. So from my understanding, and I'm no doctor or medical professional, but from my understanding, she has one gene that's inconsistent in her body, and they're not entirely sure what that inconsistency is. You know, they've ruled out autism, Asperger's, all your standard diagnosis. So she could possibly be the only person on record or in existence currently that has that. It could be years before we know. It could be months before we know. So it's a big waiting game with her. You know, so she takes a lot of our time and energy in taking care of her and making sure her needs are met. And super thankful for my wife and all that she does. You know, she's given up her career she was a cosmetologist for 12 years. She's given that up to be a full-time homemaker and stay-at-home mom to make sure that our middle child is taken care of the best way she possibly can. So
I would imagine that'd be hard being a business owner and trying to juggle that.
Yeah.
And a city council member on top of that.
Yeah, man. I do a lot, and like I said, I couldn't do it without my wife, and I'm very thankful for that because I'm a go-getter. I have a hard time sitting still. I have a hard time, you know, blending into the shadows and not getting up and doing something, you know. So I feel like at this point in my life, I'm in the best position I possibly could be in to do those things, and without her, it wouldn't be possible. So,
aside from your dad passing away, who was a big influence on you, your child having that disease that you have to tend to, along with all the businesses that you run, are there any other struggles that people might not know about that you've had to endure that kind of stick out to you?
Oh man, I could just start going down a list, and we could.
Hey, just go ahead. Tell us.
You know, so like I said, my dad passed away right in front of me. We survived a house fire in 2013 that we had to be rescued from the roof from.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. A lot of local people know about that. Oldest daughter was a year old, and we had came home. I can't remember what we were doing all day, but we were gone all day. We came in the house. Everybody, I think we had pizza for dinner. We all got around to go to bed, and my wife and daughter went upstairs by themselves, and our daughter was having a hard time sleeping by herself, so my wife took her into the bedroom, and eventually I made my way upstairs and went to bed, shut the door behind me, which was really weird for me. We don't tend to sleep with the door shut. And I remember it was like 1 a.m. My wife, you know, she's tapping me, and I have a terrible habit of setting a bunch of alarms and not waking up to my alarms, you know, or hitting snooze 100 times. And she goes, "Brenton, why is your alarm going off?" And I said, you know, half asleep, I grabbed my phone off the nightstand. I'm like, my alarm's not going off, you know. So I realized that it's the smoke detectors.
Yeah.
So I'm like, man, you know, we made pizza. Like maybe I left the oven on, and you know, so without thinking, I opened the door, and I've tried to describe this so many times over the years, but the wave of heat that hit me when I opened that door was unfathomable. And you know, we had a drop ceiling with the painted strips of you know, metal that hold them together, and paint was dripping off of that. That's how hot it was, you know. And so I shut the door and told my wife, I said, we're going to have to go out through the window, which luckily our bedroom was right above the porch roof. So she climbs out, I hand her the baby, and I climb out behind her, and at this point our house is pretty engulfed in flames. A police officer has arrived. They're waiting for the fire department to arrive. And it felt like an eternity, but we were on that roof for probably 10 minutes before they could actually get us down. And, you know, there's a lot of things that happened in between that are kind of congealed together in my memory. But the moral of the story is we eventually were saved from the roof and, you know, got away with our lives. We lost everything, you know, had to start fresh. It was an experience that I think has definitely changed the way I look at life. Moving forward. You know, it's definitely humbled me to go from having all these things that I worked hard for to not having it at all. So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I would imagine so.
Yeah.
You guys are really lucky to have gotten out of there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you ever figure out what caused the fire?
We didn't. There was some speculation. You know, it happened in the backyard area, likely under the deck that was behind the house. But to this day, you know, it's still undetermined on the report. So I try not to dwell on that too much and just kind of move forward with life and hope that there was no ill intentions involved, or that, you know, it wasn't an accident on our part. But either way, we're alive. You know, we've got healthy children, and we've been able to build our life back. So there's tons of things that I've been through. Maybe people that I probably should expose for the wrongs that they've done me in my life, but I feel like the person I am today is more forgiving than I once was, and I feel like God will handle that, you know. So,
what made you build up the courage to decide to come share your story with us today?
You know, I joke all the time, man, because I get a lot of time with people as a tattoo artist. You know, sometimes I'm tattooing the same person for 6-8 hours, and you know, I'm untrained or unqualified, but a lot of times I become their therapist, and they get to unload all of their problems or trials or tribulations on me, and I like being there for people through that. You know, I like hearing other people's stories, but a lot of times I don't get to share mine. You know, and not that I feel like mine's more important than anybody else's, but I've joked over the years that, man, I could write a book with all all the stories that I have, you know, but nobody's going to go out and buy that book. So I felt like, you know, if it took 10, 20 minutes of somebody's time, they wanted to hear what I had to say, and you know, maybe it'll help somebody out. Maybe it'll give them that extra push they need to do something that they didn't think they were sure they could do. You know, that would be enough for me. So that's really all it is, man. I just was hoping somebody would hear it and get something from it.